So we are Apollo Solar, representing the University of Alabama. Our team is made up of Alex Baker, Brandon Paul, Brian Henderson, Chase Wilkerson, Kara Block, and Noah Conlin. Our senior advisor was Dr. Srinivasan at the University of Alabama's Mechanical Engineering Department, and our district case was the University of Nebraska at Lincoln.
All right, so obviously for this district, we're at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. There was three major parts of campus: the city campus, the east campus, and the agricultural fields that are located next to the east campus. Obviously, the overall goal was for us to create a photovoltaic system in each of these three campuses using ground mounts, carports, and rooftop mounts. And then this part of the competition involved battery storage, the need for reliable delivery of electrical services for the animal science complex. And that's what we've focused on since December.
So some of our initial goals for this project that we sort of aligned for ourselves, and some of them that were given to us from the competition, we wanted to create a system that gave a reliable energy offset. So we were aiming for around 50% renewable energy use. That was based on some of the irradiance profiles we found on the area and some of the previous winners, their energy offset numbers. We also wanted to make sure that this was a financially viable project. So we were aiming for a rate of return of around 11%. We also needed to avoid overvoltages to make sure we didn't have any negative effects on the already existing grid. And part of the project, as presented to us for UNL, was they wanted to make it known that the campus was committed to a more reliable source of energy. So we wanted to include systems like power flowers or carports that are easily noticeable by the people of the campus. And we also wanted to do a model comparison. So create a few different models and compare those to see which ones are the most financially viable, with also being energy efficient.
So we divided our team of 6 people into 4 different sub-teams that align with our 4 main objectives for this project. These sub-teams are conceptual design, development, distribution, and financial.
As the lead of the conceptual design team, my goal was to obviously create a PV system across the entire campus. Both 2D and 3D models were created using Aurora. I also was able to double check some of my work using Helioscope as well, which is another system. Our overall size for all 3 campuses was about 12.9 kilowatts DC or about 9.9 kilowatts AC. This is using a 1.3 DC AC ratio. Our annual production from Aurora was about 13.4 gigawatt hours per year of AC. Now we also calculated this using average DNI of Lincoln, Nebraska from NREL site over the last 10 years, as well as information provided to us. And we did that for every single day of the year, averaged it, and found a reliable DNI. And using that, we calculated about 18.2 to 18.3 gigawatt hours per year of AC. We're using a 540 watt Jinko module. Now it has not been released, but it's going to be out by 2022. So this is something we decided by the time something would get started, it would be a good module to use, as it's going to be more advanced, it's going to be larger, and be able to get more energy than a lot of modules that are out on the market right now. And we use that module all throughout the system, and we've got about 23,908. And our string sizing is going to be 26 modules. Now, if you notice, we have the picture right next to the conceptual design is our agricultural fields. We had 3 main large arrays. All those are planned with a 30-foot setback for fencing and to allow any vehicles that need to get through there, any resources that need to get moved into the area. We have a large amount of carports throughout the campus, including one large carport system that would be over the basketball court. And then we properly put it on rooftops that would receive proper sunlight and would not have too much shading. Go to the next slide. This is a 3D look at some of most of the system, and then an example of some of the stringing. And if you go to the next slide, this is a look at our irradiance model using Aurora. Every single array has an annual solar axis of over 90%, if not 95 majority, then we're 95% or more annual solar access, which, having worked in the renewable industry as an internship for last summer, I know that my company would not have accepted anything under 85% of annual solar access or less.
Our development plan consists of both the building and site plan, as well as a construction plan and timeline. Our report has explained how both of these plans comply with restrictions such as zoning regulations, local codes, and the various permitting processes. These plans will focus on the analysis and construction on city campus, East Campus, and the agricultural field section of the campus located at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Hit the next slide. Now into the building and site analysis. We will have rooftop mounted installations on both city and East Campus buildings, and we will have ground mounted installations located on the agricultural field section of campus. When analyzing the rooftop mounted installations, the only building restriction to avoid will be the historical landmarks. So you can see in red on the city campus map, we'll need to avoid construction on the Sheldon Museum of Art located on city campus, as this building identifies as one of the campus's historical landmarks. And there's no historical landmarks to avoid construction on an East Campus. So when analyzing the ground mounted installations on the agricultural field section of campus, we will need more restrictions to consider avoiding. Locating in red on the agricultural fields map are high concentrations of bedrock, and bedrock's very difficult and expensive to drill through. So we will avoid ground mounted installations in these areas to keep our installation costs to a minimum. The other restrictions on this section of campus we'll need to avoid are any flood maps and wetlands. And according to the research I have conducted, there are no applicable wetlands or flood maps in this section of campus that we will need to avoid. You hit the next slide. The construction timeline was created using HeroX's construction template on HeatSpring. So the final construction documents such as main building permit, the necessary secondary permits, and approval through the authority having jurisdiction should take no more than a total of 5 weeks. The procurement processes will be finalized between 4 to 12 weeks. And after these steps, construction may begin. And the timeline for completion of this project is set at 34 to 36 weeks. Although this might be a little bit of a stretch, this time frame accounts for potential delays such as weather restrictions. So to conclude, our final timeline for completion of the entire project falls between 11 and 12 months total.
Okay, so now we'll touch a little bit on the distribution analysis side of our project. Basically, the way we iterated our designs throughout the entire project was Chase and I worked on OpenDSS while Brian was modeling these systems in Aurora, and he would send us numbers to model in OpenDSS. We would analyze those systems as built in OpenDSS, check for overvoltages and other distribution problems, and then iterate designs with smaller subarrays or moving some systems around to create systems that don't create large overvoltages. So in the end, we ended up with about 15 subarrays. The bottom picture you can see there is a rough sketch of the grid overlaid on top of East Campus, with the red circles being the different subarrays that we've split each of the models into. So like I said, that's 15 subarrays. We have currently our system is of no risk of compromising the current electrical grid. There are no new overvoltages introduced, and there were no upgrades necessary in the current system onto the current grid. So next I'll touch on the battery a little bit. As is previously stated, our goal with the battery for UNL was to create a resilience case for the animal science complex. We wanted to cover at least 30% of the critical loads in the animal science building, and that is about $2 million worth of assets. And that system needs to be entirely powered by the system on top of the animal science complex, which again is around 1.1 megawatts of power. So the outage we designed for this battery, since that was given to us to design, was a 1 hour outage twice a year. We preferred this outage because it gave us a little bit more leeway with battery size and kept prices and battery specs pretty manageable. So our final battery design that we came up with was a 188 kilowatt power and a 377 kilowatt hour capacity. And that battery has an 85% probability of surviving the designed outage across the year. You can see on the top chart there that number sort of steadily declines across each hour. So that drops to about 78% in hour 2 and 72% in hour 3. The largest drop being from hours 6 to 7. You can see there that's about a 54% chance of survival, and then down to a 38% chance of survival. The worst 2 months that we have for this battery case are December, January. That's only around about 75% chance of surviving an outage. And those numbers also sort of steadily decline past that first hour. This battery also has no grid dependence, so it'll be, like I said, entirely charged by the animal science complex system and will not be using the grid at all.
And of course, the system is only viable if it is financially viable. A financially viable system is indicated by a few key traits or terms, including an industry acceptable power purchase agreement, internal rate of return at least 11%, and a net present value of greater than 0. If we go to the next slide, we will see our bill analysis. So far, the university itself as a whole spends about $9 million per year. This is a linearly scaled value from our 2 main campuses that we're looking at now. The 2 main campuses encompass about $1.1 million worth of electricity annually. With our optimization strategy, we propose to decrease the billing demand, which will in turn decrease our energy charge.
From the data provided for the 29 buildings on these 2 campuses, we were able to get a monthly demand rate for the year of 2019. On the chart here, you can see that the non-summer months were what had the highest demand out of each of the months. And this makes sense as there's less activity during the summer. If we go to the next slide, we can see here at the top our cash flow diagram. On year 10, the system becomes profitable and begins making money for the investor as well as the customer. In the bottom left, we've modeled the estimated PPA price with an escalator of 2%, modeled against the utility price as it increases at an inflation rate of 3% over the next 20 years. With these parameters, our internal rate of return is right at 15%. And over the course of 20 years, our net present value is right at $270,000. With these, our PPA price was about 5 cents per kilowatt hour. And the initial installation cost is about $16.1 million, but with federal and state subsidies, this gets down to about $9 million installation cost. And the annual operating cost is about $170,000 a year, and that includes maintenance and cleaning costs. And again, our net present value is around $250,000, and our internal rate of return is about 15%.
So to determine the viability and risk associated with this system, the annual production over the past 10 years was calculated from the hourly DNI, estimating the annual production. Well, we use this to estimate the annual production of this PV system for its size. So here we can see that there's an average annual production of about 18 gigawatt hours. And then as you can see here, it's much higher, or average is much higher than our break-even point of about 12.8 gigawatt hours annually.
So the main points of our system are that calculated, we have an 18.3 gigawatt hour per year production. Using Aurora is a 13.4. We know that's not necessarily as accurate, and that's still above our break-even point regardless. We have about 56.7% of total energy usage offset, no system overloads at all, an internal rate of return of 15.02%, project earnings of a little more than $271,000, and an 85% chance of survival for our battery. Thank you very much.
Thank you.